Still waiting for the slide to come up. It says we're live, but I'm still waiting for the slide.
Spinning.
There we go.
There we go.
All right.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I look forward to this meeting with Chantal School District Education Committee. It's October 28th, 2021. If we could take a minute, thanks for that. Great, Mrs. Metz, I was on the If we could just take a minute to introduce ourselves at the table. Mr. Tate?
Thank you, Ms. McKee, Ed Tate School Board.
Andy Block, School Board.
Denise Brooks, School Board.
Matt Frederickson, IT.
Robert Frazier, Superintendent.
Susan Alley, Assistant Superintendent.
Andy Sanko, Director of K-12 Education.
Robert Jarvis, University of Pennsylvania.
Dana Hayes, University of Pennsylvania.
And welcome to all of our attendants and community members. Thank you for being with us. I believe on the line, Mrs. Marcel, can you hear me?
I can. Kristen Martell, School Board.
Thank you. And Dr. Philbord, are you on the line with us as well? I expect Dr. Thor will be joining us in progress, as will Mr. Salmon. So tonight we have a very full agenda, and I really want to ensure that our board members have sufficient time to ask questions and discuss the topics we have tonight. So I'm going to really keep very tightly to our agenda items and ask that we hold public comment until the end when we have covered all of our business, starting with 3 discussion items that had been emailed to the board solely for discussion purposes. They are the change to a science elective name, the Council of Education Week, and return of high school library evening hours. I would ask my board colleagues if there are any final questions or comments on these 3 items.
I have none. I appreciate Denise bringing up the question about naming the course, and other than that,
Great, appreciate that clarification. Seeing none, we're going to move on to our agenda tonight. Handing it over to Dr. Elliott.
Thank you, Ms. McKee, and good evening, everyone. We do have 4 agenda items this evening. The first 2 items are items that we are looking for board approval, and we'll ask if we'll be able to move those to consent agenda, and then the following 2 items are items for information and discussion this evening. So we'll get started. We have a couple guests with us this evening to present some of our curriculum coordinators and teachers. So I'm first going to turn it over to Ms. Beth Lynch. She is our visual arts coordinator, and allow her to present information on our proposal to add honors ceramics too.
Hi everybody, good evening. Thank you so much for having me. This is a course I am thrilled to propose to you. It's one we've been talking a lot about in the arts department for a few years now, and after collecting some data and looking at the work our students are doing, it seems like the perfect time to bring it to your attention. So there's 3 main reasons we're proposing the course. Basically, the look for equity, for some additional studio hours, and also to prepare our students for what comes after a second level course, especially our students that are interested in pursuing the arts in their future, whether that be with an AP Studio pre-college course that we offer in-house, or whether that's preparing them for school. So as we look at our courses right now, our tracks in our department, there are 2. There's a 2-dimensional course line, which is your drawing, painting, charcoal, pastels, things like that. And there's a 3-dimensional course line, which is our ceramics and metals. And we're mainly focusing on our ceramics, as our ceramics enrollment over the last few years has been through the roof. We currently have 235 students in our ceramics program, so there's definitely a need and a want by our general community to be taking these courses. Right now, if you take a 2-dimensional course in the arts, your level 1 course is an alternate day, which means you come every other day. And your level 2 course, as a student, you have the option to continue alternate day, which may lead you into a future in the arts, or may not. It may just be a medium you like exploring. But those 2D courses also give the option for the second level to be every day. And while that seems like it's a minor change, that a 3D course doesn't have that option, it really, the option of the everyday course provides a lot to our students. So the difference in hours, in contact hours, is 86 hours for the class. So by opting to take that course every single day, for our students that have a strong interest in ceramics, they're gaining 86 additional studio hours. Whether that's preparing them with skills for that AP class so that they can get a better score, or whether that's preparing them to create a portfolio of work and present onto colleges as they go. We definitely see a strong need. We've looked at our AP scores over the last 3 years. Our AP 2D kids are averaging a 4.5 out of 5. Colleges are looking for a 3, and our 2D kids are getting it out of the park. Our 3D kids, our average is a 3.56. And while a 1 point drop doesn't seem like a huge difference, we're seeing kids that are scoring 2s and 3s, which isn't what we want to present to colleges. We want to give our Council Rock kids the best step forward we can. And the biggest difference in those two is 86 studio hours. The amount we can dig into curriculum and dig into things with students in 86 hours, and you just get so much more detail with everything involved, whether it's presenting, creating, whatever it may be. So scheduling, it would be scheduled very typical to how our 2D courses are scheduled. In some cases, if we have enough students, the course runs solo on its own. If we don't have enough students, we layer our students. So it happens in a lot of the electives at the high school. Most specifically, it happens with our drawing classes, some of our design classes. So I can tell you, the teachers that teach these already layered classes in 2D are the same teachers that would teach them in 3D. So they're already used to the layering and the differentiating and the change in rigor that comes with that. When we talk about course overview, like all of our courses in the art department, they're driven by standards. All of our courses are standards aligned. So our national art standards focuses on 4 main things: presenting, creating, responding being huge. And just the idea that our students not only are talking about how to create a body of work, but how does that body of work relate to people that have created work before them? How does creating that body of work give you an opportunity to take a risk and do something that maybe an artist never did before that you can challenge yourself to do? And with 86 additional studio hours, not only are you challenging yourself to do it, but you're not worried that if you don't do it the right way, you have no time to go back and edit it. With those additional hours for our serious art students, it gives them the time to take risks and do things they might not normally do and kind of think outside of the box. These are some of our standards that drive it. We have creation standards. Some of the main keywords that I would point out in those standards are things like contemporary art practices, cultural context, materials, tools, equipment, balancing freedom and responsibility, and how we teach our students to do those things. Along with presenting, we talk about the opportunity to critique, to look at work. What are you doing well? What are other students doing well? And how we're learning from each other. And when we talk about connecting, the big one for me is experimenting. How are we teaching our students in Council Rock to experiment with things and try new things? And that's something that crosses the boundary out of just our room into all realms of what we're trying to create as Council Rock students. And the last one is responses. How do our responses to things over time change? How do they affect who we are as artists? How are they affecting the artists we put out in the world? We want our Council Rock artists to be not just as studio practice-based artists, but as well-rounded artists that know their history and know what it's affected, how it's changed, and how it changes the future and where they're going. And then lastly, cost and staffing. This one's exciting. There's no cost because it's already materials that we're already using, and there's no anticipated change in staffing. It would just be a change in the way we number our courses and who goes where. So thank you. I'm really excited. I hope you hear the excitement. My art teachers, myself, and our ceramic students have been talking about this for a very long time. So thank you for the opportunity to bring it to you.
Thank you for that presentation.
And Ms. McKee, I'm sorry, excuse me, if I may just add, Ms. Lynch talked about how we already have courses where teachers are teaching 2 courses together. So, so I took a little look at this year alone, and currently in our 2 high schools, we have 62 courses that there's some pairing of those 62 courses. It is for 20 teachers are engaged in those kind of combined courses. And the content areas in which we have some of these combined courses are art, as Ms. Lynch talked about, family and consumer science, world language, music, technology education, and business, computer, and information technology. So, and the sharing of those courses is sometimes where, you know, we have maybe 15 students in one course and 6 or 5 in another course, and so the teachers really work to differentiate for those students when they combine those courses.
Great, thanks for that explanation. And for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Solomon and Dr. Koval. So again, I'll ask, having seen the presentation on the ceramics 2 course, are there any questions or comments from the board?
I'd just like to comment. First of all, obviously, it's pretty much a no-brainer, right? This is an easy thing. Since you're here, I just want to publicly say how proud and pleased we are that our art department was named as an outstanding visual art community in 2021. So I'm happy that I have this opportunity to say demonstration of how the elevation of the arts has taken place in our district. In my time on the board, what I have seen you do to elevate this and raise it and expose it to students, and the fact that the demand is greater, that we're preparing students for a future to explore this. Bravo. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, please.
Dr. Thorpe.
More a comment and a question, but this is fine. Why don't we ever do this in, I don't know, math or science or social studies, or we never seem to have new courses in anything but math.
Well, I mean, I believe that last year we added some new courses in health and phys ed. 2 years prior, or a year prior to that, 2 years prior to that, we added AP Computer Science Principles. We've added an English multicultural literature course. So we have added other courses.
Math?
AP Computer Science Principles is
But
one
we've
of our
never
courses.
blurred to give some people a salary to, give them the
Oh, you mean to combine courses? Absolutely, we have. We've combined some chemistry courses or some other courses where we're putting maybe some accelerated kids and some academic kids or smart kids together to make sure that students are getting the course they need. So we have done that on occasions.
Anything else from the board? And Mrs. Marcel on the phone, any questions, comments?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And hearing none, I guess I'm looking to see, do we have some consensus around putting this on the agenda as a consent item?
Yes.
I'm hearing no objections, so we'll move forward.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our next item is, we have actually 4 people here who are going to share some information, and I'll let them introduce themselves, or 2, all 4 of you, right? Okay. This is an additional elective that we're looking to add for specifically targeting our English language learners and some of the changes that we've had recently with the numbers of our students at the high school. So I'll let our folks introduce themselves and go ahead and share the information with us.
I'm Rose Burkhead. I'm the K through 12 English Language Arts Coordinator.
I'm Shannon Hubeck. I'm an ELD specialist at Rosestown and Newtown.
I'm Erin Clark. I'm an ELD specialist at Sierra South and Sierra North. Kelly Hopkins. I'm the reading specialist at Sierra North. Okay, so we are proposing an ELD English Language Development elective course for our English language learners. Our rationale for the course is that the number of ELD students in our district, the population has really grown and the needs of that population have changed. So in the past year alone, the population of students at the high school level has risen from 32 to 43. And within that population, their needs have grown. So currently, 74% of our students are at the entering, emerging, and developing levels of English, and our immigrant population has grown significantly as well. In order to be successful at the high school level, we think that our students need more targeted instruction in English, and so that's why we are proposing this course. Our current model works on a push-in, pull-out model, which means that as the specialists, we pull our students from their classes to receive services, or we push into their classes to provide them the services. So for example, Kelly teaches a strategies of reading class, and I push in to support students in her class. Or I might pull students to my office to work with them. Under this new model, there would be a specific time scheduled into their school day for them to receive English language development instruction. The addition of that class would really allow them to receive services in a way that's not interrupting their core contact classes. So right now they're being pulled from science, from math, from English to receive that instruction, and then missing that instruction in their core contact classes. So we believe that this would be a way for them to meet the rigors of high school while also receiving the services that they need to be successful. So this would be an alternate day course that would be taught by the ELD teacher. The number of sections would be based on need primarily, so the number of students who need the service, that's how the classes would be determined. The course would be taught at both high schools, and then in addition, the course is looking to target about 2 hours a week for students so that they can get actual English language instruction, so that if we can improve their ability in English, then hopefully we can fill in the other gaps with curriculum areas like math and science and English. Identifying students. Currently, for the Reading and Writing Workshop program, students are tested into that program so that the remediation can begin in reading and writing. So this would take on a very similar type of way. The students would be identified with different diagnostics that would give us formative data to allow us to determine if that placement is correct. In addition, we would be considering entering, emerging, or developing language proficiency levels, so students could be labeled that way to be able to determine what would best suit them for remediation. And then we already work so closely together with the ELD population at North, and I know that you work as well at South, so we would continue to pair up within the context of strategies for improving your reading, as well as this new ELD course to be able to meet all of the students' needs so that they can be as successful as possible. So the course will target all 4 domains of English: listening, reading, speaking, and writing. That's what they're tested on under standardized assessment that they take each year, the Vita Access Test. And the course would be differentiated to meet the needs of all students in the class. So students at entering and emerging and developing levels of English would all be placed together in this class, and we would differentiate within the class to meet all of their language goals and needs. And we would do some progress monitoring and be assessing skills throughout the class to determine how they are progressing. For the course, we would be using both English language arts and English language development standards, since this course would be housed within the English program at the high schools. And then the best part, as far as we're concerned as well, is that no additional cost for the course, no additional staffing. This would be something that we can take on within the 2 high schools, and the students can be properly supported.
Great, thank you for that presentation. Do we have any questions, comments from the board? Let's go ahead.
Question, it's probably an easy one. This is an elective then?
It would be counted as an elective.
And you've got 40, you're counting on, say, 43 students spread across 2 high schools, so you're gonna offer it once or twice during the day, is that? How many kids you can put in this elective, I guess?
I think we have to look at this as a varying basis in terms of how many students initially. I think they're talking about trying to get, I don't have the logistics in terms of the way they're going to schedule it, but I'm assuming it would be 1 class every other day, so it would be 1 class period. I think we can look at right now anywhere between 6 and 8 students, at least at North, more at South, because I know the population is larger there, with an idea that this population is going to continue to grow over the years.
That's fine, I just wanted to know, what you're looking for and how many kids you thought you might have in there. This is one-on-one in some regards.
Absolutely, I have strategies for reading class right now where I have 7 students who are emerging language learners and various levels. So this would be perfect for all 7 of those, but it also depends on what they take and how it falls.
And Dr. Ford, if I may too, we call this an elective, but I think a better way to think about this class is more of a selective.
That's how it fits in the high school schedule.
Yes. And I think too, I know Dr. Sanko and I met with the high school principals and the schedulers to begin talking about how do we look at scheduling this, and so they've already started thinking about, how do we make sure that we have this in the schedule for the students, think about ways to group the students together, and still make sure that students are able to get other courses that they need or that they're selecting. So we'll be looking at some data later in the spring when we have a little bit more data about where our students are, particularly our rising 9th graders, to see how we can schedule students for this.
I just imagine the 4 of you after last year are really busy. So I'm not sincerely so.
Any other questions or comments?
How wonderful to have something like this to set them up to be more successful in the other curriculum areas that they're working in. This is wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Clearly a growing need, and I'm pleased to see us being responsive to it. So I assume then that we have approval to move this as a consent agenda item. Thank you very much. I thank all of you. You have a long day at work, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight.
Yes, so we'll let them all read.
Call them, what are you gonna do, that's not,
Thank you.
I need you, we're gonna try to.
Regarding
we'll do a quick question on this topic while we have our guests here, but we're really gonna hold public comment until the end.
Okay, so I used to work in math department as a special education teacher. And there was I had a student at one time where I couldn't identify if there was a learning difference within the math. And I was just wondering, I may have missed it. So I was just wondering that this, I look at zones like the study skills, where maybe the teachers can maybe come in and help in the math as well, if you saw an area of that. And I was just curious if you saw that a student was struggling in math. Is that something that you would be able to do during this time?
I think this course opens up a lot of possibilities for us to continue to think about ways to service this population, but you're absolutely right. It's extremely difficult to tell the difference between a learning disability and an ELD issue. But I think that, again, having this approval, which we greatly appreciate, will help us be able to go down all of those channels, math, science, social studies, English, and we hope to better serve our population.
I'm extremely excited about this, so
Thank
great
you.
to hear you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
And thank you. Have a great night. Thank you.
All right, Ms. McKee, we're on to our third agenda item this evening, and this is our an overview of our equity review, equity quality program review that was conducted by the Delaware Valley Consortium for Excellence Through Equity. We do have two guests with us this evening, Dr. Robert Jarvis, who is the director of the Youth Penn Coalition for Educational Equity and DVCEE, and Ms. Dana Muniz, who is the associate director. So before I turn the presentation over to them, I just want to highlight the purpose of this study and why we worked with Penn to do this. So our vision as a district has always been success for every student every day. And that vision inspires us towards continuous improvement, inclusive of examining our practices, our policies, and our processes that impact student success. Our strategic plan those goals of our strategic plan really serve to inform the direction and the focus that we take towards our continuous success and growth as a district. In particular, in this case, our current strategic plan is grounded in student wellness and really targeting a holistic approach to student success. So it's more than just academics in our strategic plan. Our goal of student wellness is really focused on the whole child and the whole student and their success as an individual. And in particular, our first two goals of our strategic plan really target what's happening in the classrooms and in our schools with student wellness, particularly looking at diversity, but also looking at how we redefine student success. One of our action steps related to our first goal in our strategic plan is to embrace and incorporate diversity in all of its various dimensions and continue to build an inclusive and welcoming environment for all students and district stakeholders. And this action step, one of the strategies was for us to conduct an equity audit of our curriculum. In the spring of 2021, as an administration, we opted to target an audit or a review on our secondary level practices and course progression as a smaller focus to inform this action step and help us build a more inclusive and welcoming environment for our students at the secondary level. We enlisted the expertise of the University of Pennsylvania Coalition for Educational Equity and DVCEE to help complete that review. And this evening, they're going to share an overview of their findings with us. And this report is also currently found on our district website. So we are very grateful for your time this evening and the work that you've done. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jarvis, and we'll give you the floor to begin the presentation.
I'm going to turn it over to Dana. And fill in as we go.
Well, good evening. want to thank Council Rock School District, first of all, for having us in your district and really learning with and from you and your stakeholders. It was a pleasure to be here, and I was just telling Bob this afternoon, it's hard to believe that it was in May. It did not feel like it was in May, so thank you for having us. Just a little bit about the study. It was a qualitative study, as Dr. Elliott said, of the secondary level, and course access, placement, and inclusion in courses. We had 16 folks in our team, most of them from DBCEE member districts. We had superintendents, assistant superintendent, leadership from other districts, folks from the intermediate units in the area, and from other educational organizations. So we had a very robust team with a lot of expertise, and we were very thankful for the time they volunteered. It is also a learning experience for them, and they were thrilled to be here at Council Rock. We conducted, it was close to 70 focus groups and interviews. In that time, we spoke to about 230 people. Stakeholders, students, parents, community members, obviously district administration, staff. So we really try to get a cross-section of the district and the stakeholders in the district in order to be able to get a sense of how course placement and course access is going through. Dr. Jarvis, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, that's fundamental to the structure. Again, this is the fourth study that we've done in the region. And again, very unique to, and part of the process actually was bringing together a district level team to help us really begin to focus on the questions that they wanted to address. Obviously this work is extremely expansive, and but we really wanted to focus in on these key areas of student access, who is getting into the best of what, who gets the best, essentially the best of what Council Rock has to offer, and then looking at those issues of access and the opportunity to learn, and then the inclusive practices, and especially beginning to look at how kids feel about their experiences here, and we'll talk more about that.
So we had two focus questions, as Dr. Jarvis alluded. These questions were generated through the district equity leadership team that came together to really zero in on what the questions should be for the team to explore. Question one, focus on equitable access and inclusion. I'm not going to read the whole question to you, but you have a sense from that. That question was really about, are students able to access the courses that they want and that they need in order to succeed? Do they have the information in order to get access into those courses? How do they feel about that experience? And then focus question number two was around equitable opportunity to learn. And in that question, we really focused on, are students having the right supports? When they access the courses that they need, do they have the right supports? Tutoring, do they have, or is there differentiation in the classroom? And in this question, we also asked about the definition of success. And that was a key question that was surfaced by the district team, because we really wanted to figure out, when students are in classes, do they feel like they're being set up for success? Do they feel like they need, that they have what they need for success, and that they know what being successful in those classes are? Dr. Jarvis? Some key observations. We want to begin with the strengths based on the district, and there are many. This is just a short list, obviously. There's more in the report, but it is obvious that the district has an evolving vision of equity and excellence through equity, a commitment to that, so we applaud you for that. There is just as we saw in the presentations just before this, an evolving and very diverse and wide variety of curriculum offerings, and your students are very lucky to have access to so many levels and just a very amazing access to courses. And another area that we really wanted to highlight here is your special education program. We heard from a number of stakeholders, parents, teachers, students, how supportive that program is and how much of a difference it makes in the lives of students. So we wanted to highlight that as a strength as well. areas for growth. We felt that after conversations, there's some more work to be done in assessing and monitoring students' sense of belonging in the school buildings. We will speak more about that in a little bit. Also, some challenges with the course leveling and tracking practices. Some of those challenges include how are parents getting information about what courses their children should access, how are students interpreting that information, and so on. And finally, just a more of an emphasis on regularly monitoring disaggregated data to really make sure that the district is seeing patterns as they emerge, whatever they may be, across the dimensions of difference for students, so that you can be proactive in addressing any of those inequities that may arise. Dr. Jarvis.
I think in regard to that disaggregated data, I think one of the things that we found was that there, at this point in time, it's really at the beginning stages of developing a monitoring system that way. And so even the data that we had requested from the district came to us in big Excel spreadsheets, again, which made it difficult to kind of make sense of and interpret. So that's again going to be certainly one of our recommendations on that end. But to really, again, to be able to kind of monitor students' placements and who gets in when, and especially movement up and down the different levels, I think is another kind of critical piece to be looking at. And then also, one of the things that we want to emphasize is also the qualitative data, beginning to really gather the perceptual data of, especially from our students and our parents in terms of their experiences with us. I think certainly the students we talked with and the parents we talked with had much to tell us about, again, both the assets and what's been really great about the experiences for their kids, but also the challenges that they face, and especially if they're kids that are out of the mainstream. One of the other groups that we just to make sure we get this in, one of the other groups that we saw that probably could use some targeting are those great kids in the middle, which you have a large number of those students. You've got obviously a lot of really high-flying, very successful kids. And again, I think we saw students that, at the most challenged, I think are getting a lot of great supports. There's a lot of students in the middle that I think are just kind of, we see, are just kind of going through the motions. I know you and I had this conversation. And, but again, I think that would be something to begin to think about. But again, a big part of that is just gathering some students' perceptions through surveys, focus groups, interviews with kids.
So some suggestions for improvement, obviously what Dr. Jarvis was addressing would be one of them that is included in the report, but also some reevaluation of your course placement policies and practices to really take a look at how we could increase access for students, right? How are some of those decisions being made, and are there ways that we could improve the way those decisions are made? Student voice in that process would be beneficial as well. Some, as we spoke, more disaggregated data, gathering, analyzing it, monitoring it in a way that is transparent and that is usable for the district. So that's one of our other suggestions for improvement. And finally, just continuing to push on our commitment to equity. One way could be the development of a district-wide equity team, which there may be the beginning of, and also some work that we know you already began and sort of stopped because of the pandemic, because we know how things go. But that portrait of a graduate to really figure out what those important outcomes are for your students, and to get input from the community about those important outcomes to create that portrait of a graduate. So those are just very brief suggestions for improvement. There is more in the report, and the district will be digging in and really figuring out where the right place to start is. But we, again, thank you for your very welcoming environment and for allowing us to work with you on this. Dr. Jones, do you have anything?
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go around and see if we have questions or comments. I'll start on this side. Mr. Salomon, anything at the moment?
No, I think it's great, and
Dr. Jarvis, our conversation probably went longer than you expected, but I appreciate your time. Where do we go from here? I think this is the question that a lot of the community wants to hear. 65 pages of the document, you get lost after several deep. But there's the questions, you know, what does all this mean in 65 pages of appendix and everything? So I don't know if we're advanced that or not. That's kind of something I have at this point.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the whole piece to this is the report can't be the milestone event, right? I mean, it's so what? Okay, so what does all this mean? So as it says up there at the bottom, you know, our job at this point, and we have not yet really begun to do this with any kind of earnest, in any kind of earnest way, is to determine those so what. So what does this mean for us? So we see these strengths, we see these weaknesses, we have these recommendations. We have a lot more work to do to make meaning out of this, and you know, really have more conversations with different stakeholder groups, as Bob and Dana have mentioned, and ultimately come back to the board with, hey, here's our thinking, here's our recommendations, here are the meanings that we've made out of this. Here we'd like to go this direction, that direction, start doing this, stop doing this, and like anything with this, as you said, it's a 65-page report, so there's a lot of info in there, a lot of content. You know, eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? And we're going to have to be mindful of that as we do this work. But I see that as really being the next step to this.
If I may, obviously it's on our website. Are the boots on the ground in the schools, our administrators and teachers, have they been told about this? Are they aware of this? Have they read it? What's your sense with that? And again, it's a big document, so.
It is a big document, and
because it's going to push down from the lowest level all the way up.
Yeah, without a doubt. We've shared it. We've shared it internally, and through the same means that we've shared it externally. With COVID, with busing, with, you know, fill in the blank. What we haven't wanted to do, and what we still don't want to do, is to place another burden on folks with a time crunch behind it, etc. So what we want to do, really, as an entire district leadership team, is take this bull by the horns, have this first entree into it, and then, like I said, start branching out these conversations. But it's not a stressor. I really want to put on our overall staff.
No, I think it's something the team before you can look at, and that you talked about last year, or a larger group. I think you and I discussed that, even that larger group of stakeholders in the district.
Right.
Yeah, from
exactly.
across all boundaries and district levels, and getting more perspectives from it.
Absolutely.
Because it's deep. It's a deep report. And,
yeah, it is.
And again, I think, I begin to identify a team, okay, I think would be really valuable. Again, the stakeholders from a variety of places and spaces. I think one of the other strengths I think we found in here was, we talked to a number of committed staff, especially teaching staff, who are really interested in helping move this work forward. So I think it's, given that, maybe the first step is we need to identify some of these people, who are ready to step up and, despite all the other challenges that everybody's up to right now.
the plate's only so big.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, that team can again be the group that begins to, look at the data piece, for example, to begin to, be that kind of core group that, kind of helps monitor, kind of where things are going. That would be our recommendation. I think, and to tell you the truth, again, this is, as I've worked with literally hundreds of districts, this whole where do we start, where do we begin, how do we organize, is really the question that everybody asks. So we've got a number of other districts that I think that could provide some great frameworks that are working for them. So we'll definitely be in touch on that.
And we're here, yes, for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Mrs. McKay.
Thank you. Dr. Hilbert?
Sure. I'll make a comment as a parent. When we mentioned differentiation, that's a very bad word. As a parent who's experienced differentiation in Council Rock, it doesn't. There isn't. So unless you're on the lower end, but if you're on the upper end of the spectrum, you don't get any differentiation. Regardless of what's been told as a parent, I can tell you that doesn't happen. There's not enough time in the day to ask a teacher to do that. So asking for more of it is stretching something that's thin even thinner. So I think that's just one. But the word that really struck me was leveling and tracking. Can you define that? Because that sounds like it could be interpreted a dozen ways and it's vague. So can you expound on what leveling and tracking is? You know, for a high performing student, so to speak.
Sure, so your district has, different course levels, right? We have the honors level, AP level, the academic level. And, that's not really good, sorry. We're working with another district, so I'll make sure I keep it straight. So figuring out what those tracks mean, one of the things that we will see in the report is some of the confusion for students lies in what does it, beyond the weighted GPA, what does it mean to be in those different tracks and those different kinds of courses, and helping students manage their expectations and travel through those. So that's, we really, the way we're talking about it in the report is the different levels that have been assigned to the different tracks that have been created by the district for each course, for the different courses.
And I guess where I'm going is if you're in an AP course in high school, you're in it because you have an aptitude. That can't be rectified by throwing a tutor at something. You got there from 6, 8, 10 years of decisions, or process. It doesn't get back to in some magical form in a course. So I'm concerned that, this needs to start in first grade, because our tracks are what they are. And it can't be fixed. It's my opinion. If you think it can be, I love very explicit, information as to what that means. But, I will never be a pro basketball player. Doesn't matter how many coaches you put on me. I will never be one. So I don't have the skills for that.
I think what we might be suggesting is that if you have many students, probably could be in honors level kind of courses, if they have the, if people saw some potential, okay, in them, that maybe a spark something that would again really engage them, and helping move them forward. And I think what we saw was, again, I think a system that is pretty fixed. By the time, like you said, early on, it's pretty well determined what track or what level, students are going to be on. But I think you also have a number of those students with the kind of right support and help and development, especially in terms of, again, some of their cognitive skills, their thinking skills, their problem solving skills. If they're only stuck in just kind of the memorize, spit back and forget kind of level, which is kind of what most average levels are, they're not going to progress. But I think if we begin to think about how we challenge our kids, to those higher levels and support them once they get there. I think that's the other thing that we see with many other districts, is that they're opening doors of opportunity to get kids into those honors and AP levels. But again, kids are not being successful. And again, you can blame the kid or blame the system. I think it's probably a little bit of both. Does that make sense?
Support comes from forward too. How do we reach that? I mean, I don't want to blame just the system for some of this. Some of this is outside of our control. Great deal is outside.
But I think we also saw, as data suggested, as we talked to some parents who just are not aware of, again, how to best support and navigate the system.
And as a board member for X number of years and watching Dr. Frazier try and get them to know, it doesn't matter. We still get what we didn't know. But I don't say we shouldn't try more, but again, it's all about how much initiative mom or dad or both are going to put into
It's a piece of it.
Yes.
It's a piece of the process.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. King? Or shall I come back to you?
No, thank you. Thank you both for such an excellent report, and I really want to congratulate Dr.
Fraser, Dr. Elliott, Dr. Sanko, and everybody who participated. This is an excellent report. It actually takes a bit of courage to engage in this kind of process because, you know, you're exposing yourself and saying to an external group, come in and take a close look at us and we're going to have a very public discussion of what's going on. And 228 people participated. That's amazing. This is marvelous. It's well written, it's well organized, and I really appreciate very specific suggestions for improvements at the end. Comment on that in a minute. But, from reading the report, it seems you really captured a lot of what I've seen in council law, strengths and weaknesses. And you addressed one of the main concerns, which I spoke about when I advocated us doing this study, when it was recommended to us, which is that whole tracking system and how it's rigid. It feels like kids get locked in, and I worry, especially for the kids, as you expressed, Dr. Jarvis, the kids in the middle. You know, those decision points come early, and I want to make sure we're doing it fairly. You know, the comments we saw from parents in here, I think parents have a lot of responsibility to figure out how to access the system, but we have a lot of responsibility to make sure that we are making the system accessible to parents, and that takes resources. Ideally, we could hire 20 more school counselors to help guide families by the hand through the process, but that's not feasible. But we have to look at what we can do. The one other point that I wanted to make was, the report has been on the website for some time. People should take a look at it. There's very specific suggestions for improvement, but I wouldn't want anybody to think that those suggestions for improvement are a roadmap for where Council Rock is going to go. We'll look at those suggestions and we'll reject some of them for various reasons, including resource limitations. We'll look at other suggestions and maybe adapt them and accept them. And then there's others that we really will work to implement, I'm sure. But I think it's wonderful. Too often we get a report that's simply an assessment of a situation that really lacks concrete suggestions for improvement. And I think the beauty of this report is those very specific suggestions that we can analyze and work on for time to come. So I think this is really well done. It was a wonderful investment of our resources, and I applaud everybody who participated. So congratulations. Thank you.
Mr. Block?
Thank you. Great recap from a really big report. It was great work, some great insights. I didn't see anything in there that surprised me, which is always a good thing. And as Mr. Tate said, I really appreciate you coming with suggestions along with those insights. I think, to Dr. Thorward's part, the things that you see in the secondary schools, there's opportunities to be better in the secondary schools, but I think they're, representative of what we're doing from early on. I think back to when we asked Dr. Fraser about, if we were going to give you the money to do full-day kindergarten, what else would you do? And his list was this long. And I just think about foreign language in the elementary schools, and just how do you open up these things. So, as I read the report, I wasn't sure what to expect, frankly, with this report. I think a lot of people probably felt that way going in. And I was just really pleased to see recommendations on how to improve kids' experience, but also improve, I don't want to say the quality of our graduates, but to better position them, to have them have stronger skills, to be farther ahead in areas than they might not have been if we don't do some of these things. So that was great. I mean, this says, hey, if we think our kids should be getting into a whole different set of schools, then there are people who think that these types of actions are going to see our graduates do that, or other things if it's not so I really love that. The question I'd ask you is, were there any big surprises that you saw in your time with us, or outliers
as compared to all of the other work that you've done in other districts? You mentioned hundreds of these things that you've done. Was there anything that really stuck out that is happening here or not happening here?
Unfortunately, I think, what we're up against, in this work is a system of schooling that has been around forever. So that, again, I think that there's not too many surprises here, okay? I think in terms of, the impact of how we structure school, and again, looking at the issues of what makes it work well for some kids and not so well for others. And so I think, at least from my perspective, Council Rock is not too different than any other district that we work with, and that's, especially in the suburban spaces here. Around that,
I don't know what surprised would be the right word, but heartened to see how the community really sees the district as a positive member of the community. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes there's a lot of distrust and a lot of issues within districts, and I was really glad to see that the council knows that is not the case. People came with a spirit of, I want to share my experience to see if we can make things better, not with a spirit of let me complain to take somebody down. So that was a really positive for us, and I think we hope it came across in the report that it is a place that people appreciate being.
Awesome. And then the other comment I wanted to make was, I appreciate that you pulled it out here around our ability to utilize data to make decisions. I think there's a ton of data out there. I think that our team does a nice job with data. I think that just putting it out there that it is disaggregated and we could be better about it is great. I'm a big fan of kind of setting a standard and then measuring against that and being able to talk about it. And some of your suggestions about putting groups together to be able to do that. So when we kind of call our shot, we can talk about how we're doing about it. I mean, we've been talking for 6-8 years about a district scorecard, and you can't just define. We never wanted to be defined by standardized tests. We never wanted to be defined by BSSA scores. But the reality is that we owe it to our kids and to the taxpayers as well to be able to set a standard, continuous improvement goals, and then say how we're doing about it. So I was pleased to see that reinforced in everything, because I do think we do a nice job of that, but we can always do better.
I think related to that is that portrait of the graduate. I think that's one of the things that with all districts is we're beginning this equity work that I'm working with them. This is where we need to start, because I think this equity work is historically been more focused on the kids that we're most concerned about, the kids that struggle. But I also think a lot about this in terms of why is this really important work for all of our students, especially in terms of preparing them for what is going to be realistically a much more diverse and complex world. I mean, we're all experiencing it right now. How are we really helping prepare all of our kids to be able to navigate and succeed?
I guess in closing, I love our strategic plan. It's massively frustrating that we haven't been able to do a whole lot of work against it in the last year and a half. But when you read it, especially if you weren't involved in the work, there's a lot in there, right? It's big, it's kind of fluffy, it's strategic, it's intended to be. Without having this, or I should say by now having this, we are prepared to develop tactics in a really meaningful way to really put some definition into the plan that Robert and team put together. So it's a nice thing. We're now making some concrete action against being able to get after that finally. So thank you.
Mrs. Brooks?
Well, Andy asked my question, so all I have are just some comments. First of all, I wasn't surprised by anything in the report, which, as Andy said, that's good. Some of the things were things like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, or that's right. I was honestly surprised by how robust and thorough and thoughtful the deliverable was. So thank you to everyone. I mean, I knew, just because of the breadth and depth of people that were involved in the focus groups and the interviews, the number of people that on your side that were involved in collecting things, the different data requests that you had. I mean, you provided something for us that is, you know, there was some conversation early on, like, well, why do we need to outsource this? We have this, why can't we do this? You have clearly, and without any question, demonstrated why internally we could never have had the capacity to get this much information and this much data and things all together to help us action on the most critical thing that we have, is working against our strategic plan. And so I don't know where it's going to lead, but there are enough, you know, nuggets and tidbits and things that at least it allows the team that will work on our strategic plan to have, you know, begin with a robust discussion and really, you know, sets us farther ahead since we've had some delays in the start. You know, the interesting thing is that I became involved in this district a long time ago, and we're sort of still talking about some of the same things that got me involved, which was, I mean, I remember when my children, and they are 27 and 30 now, but when my children were in elementary school, some of the other parents that I met were like, you have to have friends with older kids so that you can understand some of the things. And one of the things that we learned was that the decisions that you make in 6th grade can actually, like, honestly set up your path, like, for college. Because if you don't start with honors math in 7th grade, you will never get to calculus in Council Rock. And you will be limited in your science options. I mean, in social studies, English, maybe there's you know, more fluidity in how you move. But I mean, some kids, when they're 10 years old, 11 years old, cannot envision that. And so I do think that there is something inherently challenging in a structure that forces families and teachers and counselors to be thinking about how to bring out the very best in students when they're 11 years old. Because as you experience more in the middle school and the high school, you flourish in ways that you can't, you know, and your path is sort of set. So that's a sort of aside, and maybe something that the district, I mean, and literally for over 20 years, this has been a thing. We've done better because now we communicate that more. But clearly the findings in the study show that we need to do better. But what's great is that we can still continue and think about how are we delivering education. So, you know, the key thing that jumps out on this slide is supporting more rigorous academic pathways. That's what it's all about. How do we bring out the very best in our students? How do we set them up for success in the world that they're about to enter? And so, you know, the tracking things, and that's obviously much more work and major curriculum development. But what this plan does is offer some things for how we can improve to, you know, we can't change it all now, but we can make it the best that it can be and make sure that we are paying attention to students who, not deliberately, but were marginalized in some thinking. So this brings it, it makes it a more inclusive, more thoughtful, more thorough approach to how we are looking at each individual student. And so it is with tremendous gratitude, but just optimism for what this report can do to help create a springboard and a trajectory. And we have not been positioned like this before. This is exceptional work, and I'm just very grateful for it.
Mrs. Marcelli, you're on the line. Would you like an opportunity to comment?
I agree with some of the comments that, especially from Mr. Salmon. I just wanted to thank the group for presenting to the board this evening, and I look forward to hearing additional feedback from the community and from our district stakeholders. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ms. Marcelli. And I also just want to extend my thanks. The study is of just such exceptional quality. I truly appreciate all the work that went into it, and just my personal interactions with you and your team. I everyone just so, not only professional, but deeply invested in caring about education, about children, about how we deliver the best in education to our kids. So I was very appreciative of that. And I'm really happy to see the reference to the portrait of a graduate development because we've had our first meeting. I'm pleased to participate in that committee, and that is one really tangible thing that we can point at and say, yes, we are already moving ahead with this. We know where we're headed, and that's good work. So I just again want to extend my thanks. Are there any final questions or comments from the board?
Good question. Not to put you on the spot, Dr. Fraser. Did anything in this report jump out at you like, I'm missing this? I mean, Mr. Brooks talked about, your 8 years on the board here. And we talked about why we wanted to do this. Where we go from here is my initial question, but is there anything jumping out saying, man, this is something we need to tackle? Because I don't want to be, if I'm sitting here 8 years telling the story that Denise just told, I've been on the board for 8 years, I knew this was a problem, I saw this issue when my kid was in school, my kids are no longer in school, and it's still here. And maybe it's unfair to even ask that question, but it just resonates, because that's kind of what Denise said, I need to get the yes on things. That's why I embrace this, because I have a 6th grader, or 7th grader now, and Dr. Jarvis and I talked about this in life. Her career is pretty much picked out for us. So 6 years as superintendent, 8 years as a board member, like to me, let's go. This is a great starting block. You have the support in there. You have some resources from board members that have been here or leaving. Let's do this. So did anything jump off the page that you weren't expecting, or something that I don't know, it's kind of a vague question, but
No,
you're the recipient of this product, and anything.
No, it's a great question, and I get it completely. And like I said earlier, I mean, the report is the report, but we could set that on the shelf or let it live in cyberspace, and it's worth nothing to us. It's all about what we do with that report. Just critically consume it, analyze it, make meaning out of it. All that results in recommendations, and ultimately then it comes down to execution of any of that. And as has been indicated down here by this side of the table, it's been frustrating. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I've been superintendent for 6 years, and it feels like the academic focus has been maybe 1 year between closing schools and opening, a new Newtown Middle, and closing Richboro Middle, and redistricting, and COVID, and blah blah blah. It has been one thing after another, and it was interesting because a lot of that ended right as we were building and approving that strategic plan. And I think the entirety of the board was, okay, the stars are aligned. And here we are, a couple years later. The two pieces, I don't know that it surprised me, but the two pieces that stick out to me are, one, the rigidity that we have with the system that you mentioned, and two is that child in the middle. And that has been true, honestly, of every school district where I've ever worked. It's been dealt with in different ways, or not at all, in different places where I've worked. And I think that's a serious component of the work that we need to do here in Council Rock, because I think we have more and more kids, quote unquote, in the middle than what we've had in the past. And if this is about success for every student every day, and every kid having that chance and taking that chance to fulfill their dreams and reach the highest of their aspirations, we've got to play a critical role in that. And Dr. Thorwart, to your point, it's not just us. It can't just be us. Although for some kids, it is almost entirely us, or certainly largely us. But for the typical child that we have here in CR, thankfully, it really is that partnership between school and home. But I think that our attention hasn't been there systemically, and we have some real hard work to do to change that.
Thank you. And I agree. It was a big part of our conversation.
Yeah, it is. It's real.
That's
real.
every kid.
Yeah.
doesn't take much for that door to open up and they can go somewhere else.
Absolutely.
We don't want the door to open up under them and they go down, so.
Right.
And I think there's a concept of multiple pathways to success. And I think that as we were talking about this broad question around success, where I think just historically here, it's been pretty narrowly defined by the number of kids that get into the items, right? Okay, the number of kids getting into the select items. Well, that's one track, but you've got a lot of other great young people here that we talk to that, are looking to kind of find their passion and purpose. And again, I think that's another kind of area that, again, could really be enhanced. To kind of find that place, their place, not just given the system, but the possibilities.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for the very much presentation, and thank you, board members, for that discussion. Thank you again.
Pleasure.
Thank you for your patience.
All right, our final agenda item, Mr. McKee, is the Pennsylvania Pooled COVID Testing Monitoring Program, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Black. Thank you.
So I'm here to talk about the state pool testing program and the possibility of bringing that to our schools. As you probably know, the CDC recommendation for schools is that we have layered mitigation strategies, one of which being screening testing. So this would meet that criteria. We've been talking for a while about using data to inform our decisions that is local. This would give us data that is as local to our district as we can get. What exactly is present within our schools and students in our schools. It also will help our nurses to discriminate between symptoms. I'm sure you can imagine that they are seeing students with all types of symptoms all day long of coughs, viruses, colds, and this would obviously be able to tell us whether or not that is indeed COVID as opposed to making our nursing assessments and best guesses in those moments. It will also help break the cycle of transmission by identifying kids with COVID as early as possible so that we don't have the outbreaks that we have seen in some of our classrooms already. It's important to know that this is free. That's good news. It's funded by federal stimulus money, so it is at no cost to the district. We simply have to opt into the program in order to have access to it. The other really important part is that it's voluntary. So a school can opt into the program, and then individual parents can opt their children in. So if you are a parent who does not want your child to participate, then you do not need to. And that opt-in and opt-out process is rolling, so you can opt in at any point in time, so that if 1 week you're not sure and then you feel that the program seems to be working well in your child's classroom and you want to opt in at a later time, you can do that. There are currently 160 districts within the state who are currently participating, districts or private schools, and they seem to be feeling like it's been successful from what I understand. One of the concerns with testing that we've had in the past is what will this do to our district resources, and the benefit of this program is that they really take on a lot of those responsibilities so that our school nursing staff and other staff don't have to do all of that much for the program. So our staff would just ensure that the consents are received, which is done through a software program that they provide us. So it's a link, and they provide us with that program, and the link goes to the parents where they fill out the consent. But we would just look at that to determine which students parents have provided the consent. And then if we are using a centralized area for the students to be tested, then that's where we would ensure that the students are going to that centralized area. We can also have it done within the classroom itself or out in the hallway outside the classroom where that wouldn't be necessary. Lab staff, the staff of the program, which would be a nurse assigned to each school, they're responsible for all the other pieces of the program. So they would be going into the the classroom with a centralized location. They'd be helping with the nasal swab. They assist the younger children in doing it. They would supervise the older children in doing it. And then they would collect the tubes, prepare them for the courier who would then pick them up. So we don't handle any of that. The lab staff and nurses do that. Their nurses, not ours. And then they return 2 days later for the follow-up testing. And it's important to also consider that we can start this as small as we want. So we can begin with 1 grade level at 1 school to ensure all of the logistics are ironed out, that it's meeting with our approval in the way that we feel like it should run before bringing it to multiple grade levels or multiple schools. The way that it actually works is, so it would be once a week, they would come to our schools and do the testing. So the students would take a nasal swab, and each classroom, the definition of Coolidge testing means that each classroom goes in as 1 test. So everybody in the class is tested as 1. If there is anybody positive in that classroom, the class comes back as a positive. And so that information is then given to us as this particular class is positive. The nursing staff comes back 2 calendar days later. So if we chose Mondays to begin with, then on Wednesday they come back and they test each individual student in that classroom to determine who is positive. The state does not ask that you quarantine in that time between Monday and Wednesday because we don't know who is positive in that sample yet. So we have this information, and then by Wednesday we know exactly who is positive and can send them home at that point if they test positive. Then what most schools tend to do is the first test is a PCR test, and then the follow-up test on Wednesday, in my example, would be a rapid antigen test. We can choose different testing for those options if we wanted to, but that's what most of the districts are choosing at this point. And that's pretty much how the program works.
Questions, comments?
And because you're not identifying individuals, if I guess the pool group, if there's a positive in there, would a classroom be notified so parents could make individual decisions knowing that there is a positive case in the room and not know who it is, and there's no way to, if whoever tests positive, there's no way to kind of notify their family. As part of this initial, we kind of wait 2 days to sort stuff out.
So we could do that. If we choose PCR testing for the first one, the turnaround time is 24 to 48 hours. They told me it's usually within the first 24 to 36-hour window. So she said if you choose a Monday, depending on which time of day, it's usually Tuesday evening that you're finding out. We could send notification to the classroom Tuesday evening if that's what we decide to just indicate there's a positive case in your class, and then we would be doing follow-up testing the next day. That makes sense.
Yeah, so I guess, we've got a health and safety plan that's in place. Folks who opt out don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Is part of saying, yes, we want to do that, saying, hey, we need to put some more detail in our health and safety plan for this particular group of folks who opt in, or?
We could.
No, I'm asking the question. Is it just something that, you guys are looking for us to say yes to it, or is it you're looking for us to say yes and then there's a little bit more work to do? Because I love that it's free. I love that it's voluntary. It creates that choice for anybody. It's another layer within our existing health and safety plan. Depending on who you talk to, I would argue it should be different or not. But I guess my question is this kind of a yes and stop, or is this if there's a yes? I don't want to assume there's a yes. If there's a yes, is there more work to do to
It could be, if the notification piece is something you want to enter, you can put that in the health and safety plan as far as when classrooms would be notified of positive pool testing.
I would suggest that first, if the answer is yes, and obviously we're coming to the board asking for permission to do this because we think it's a good idea at the elementary level, at least until our students have a chance to be fully vaccinated, if they want to be vaccinated. That the yes then gives us the go-ahead to really dig into it. Start small, 1 grade level, 1 school. I would suggest that at the beginning of it that we wouldn't that the only change, the only addition to the health and safety plan would probably be the fact that we've been granted authority to do this program. If we would start with the PCR test, to Dr. Black's point, we don't get that notification until, using the Monday example, until Tuesday evening at the earliest. And we want those same children to be in school the next day to test. So I don't know that starting out it would make sense for us to do that. If we would start with a rapid antigen test, on the other hand, then you switch that whole dynamic. So I think that we would just need to get a little bit of experience with it. Most schools are starting with the PCR, and then 2 days later they do the rapid antigen. I think it'd behoove us to learn why that is, what the rationale is. But I don't think inherently there are any other changes to the health and safety plan because of doing this program. There could be, but that's not where we're coming from right now. We're looking hopefully for a nod to make this available to the students and parents who would like to participate.
Well, like I said at the gate, it's free, it's voluntary. I don't see it unless I'm missing something. It's taking a whole lot of district resource.
We don't think
so.
so.
So from my perspective, there's a choice there. Some don't want to go, don't worry about it. Some want it, take it. No drain on taxpayers who aren't in the schools. I'd say have at it.
Yeah, and Dr. Black, this program has been out there since.
I think it was approved in August.
I'm sorry?
The program for the state funding, I think, came through in August.
In August. And initially, as the board knows, we were not we were recommending to not participate, and that was largely because of logistical concerns. But the more that the state implemented the program, the more that we learned about it, those concerns really dissipated almost completely, to the point that it's really not even something that's on the radar at this point for us in terms of our think-abouts. So.
Yes, please. I have lots. I'll do a couple.
Can I just ask a follow-up before you jump in?
Sure.
Thank you. So you mean to tell me that the medical provider's going to provide 100 people who will be on the road for any classroom? If everybody, there's one kid that opts in, or 2 kids,
It's usually one per building.
one per building.
So they do each
Gotcha.
class. So
Gotcha.
the classes aren't done simultaneous.
Gotcha.
Well, that was actually a beautiful segue into my question.
Didn't even know what your question was.
Well, with this first one, I look at this maybe a little differently in that parents don't have to opt in, but they're still going to be impacted by it. Because class is going to stop while these kids are outside. Class is going to stop. We can't find 10 extra minutes for math in an elementary school class, and we're going to stop every class while this happens. Twice. If it's a fine, twice. I would like to see classes move forward while these kids are outside. I mean, you either opt in, there is a price here. So, and it's classroom time. And one nurse roaming around the halls is a disruption to every class all day long. So, that's my first question. Did we think about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, the time is 5 to 10 minutes. It's 5 minutes total for the collection, and then if you're moving to a centralized location, then there's that time. If it's within the class itself, then there's no additional.
Well, we're certainly going to pull it out and let everybody else.
So that would be the hallway, though. That would be, just a minute. It depends on if it's the cafeteria or where you're going. But yeah, the travel time is there. But outside of that, it would be longer than 5 minutes.
I'll let somebody else ask questions.
I have a question from a board member who can be here tonight. You had referenced how many school districts are using this. Are there any local, any nearby surrounding districts using it?
Not in the county. I haven't heard of any in the county yet, but the IU asked if we do move forward, they wanted our feedback so that they can bring it to the other school districts in the county.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, comments?
I'll just make a comment. Well, first of all, I made my position very clear at the last board meeting. Layered mitigation efforts are key to keeping our schools open. And while I recognize that 5 or 10 minutes out of the classroom is not something that's ideal, closing classrooms, having more students sick, keeping kids out of school is far less ideal. So I think this is a proactive way and would be welcomed by some parents in the district. I honestly see absolutely no reason to not pilot this and see how it can help our students. The fact that it is completely voluntary, completely free, I think that I see absolutely no reason to not go forward.
I vaguely recollect an email a while back that we've already selected a classroom in school we wanted to hire. How was that done? Was there an email?
Not that I recall, no.
I'm pretty sure there was, but okay. How would you pick where and why?
For the pilot?
For the one class?
It's not one class, it's one grade at one school.
Okay, for one grade, I'm sorry.
That would be my choice, but if you're asking me, then it would be perhaps where we're seeing a lot of children going home sick or something along those lines.
Yeah, we would, I mean, anytime we make a decision like this, we would talk with our principals and see where there's interest, see where, you know, we think we would be able to have the most successful pilot and go from there. I don't think there's a ton to read into it.
I'm having trouble with what success is for this.
I'll tell you what success is for me. Dr. Black, can you, oh no, it's on that slide. The first main bullet point, the last sub bullet point, where it says that it helps break the cycle of transmission. I'm tired of closed classes. And I believe that we need to close classes according to the criteria that we have, but I'm tired of closing classes. I want that cycle of transmission broken so that we don't have any spread. Whether that spread's happening in school or out of school or a combination of both isn't the point. If we have a child or a teacher who is COVID positive, they don't know that they're COVID positive, they're going to get tested, they test positive, and they're able to be isolated and break that cycle. Ultimately, it will result in less cases than what we're seeing now of the folks who are getting tested anyway, and success to me is closing fewer classrooms. That's unequivocally it.
There's just a kind of piece missing here all along, and you hate my focus on it. So a kid's positive is isolated, he or she is isolated. They're cut loose. We don't educate them for the 14 days they're out, right? I can't recall ever hearing about the plan for 14 days of a kid out of school. Is there one? I mean,
Last year we did. This year, we can go back to conversations that have happened in last spring, over the summer. No, it was a conscious decision, including by members of this board, to not do that. So as of today, no. Last year we did.
Mr. King?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Black. Thank you. You know, COVID is still a life and death matter. Thankfully, case counts continue to decline. This seems like a reasonable tool with very little inconvenience and resources needed on the part of the district. And the question that was asked about where we would pilot it, that got to the question that I have. I think the answer is as needed. It would be in a situation, if the board approved moving forward, the first implementation would be in a school where we thought we possibly had an outbreak. Is that correct?
It could be. Dr. Black, I think, referenced that as part of her answer. It doesn't have to be. The purpose of the pilot is to, before we jump in at all 10 schools, all 7 grade levels at each school, I mean, you're talking about 70 entities there. Let's start with one so that we understand what exactly the program is. We think we do. We think we understand what our logistics are, but if there's something to it that we're not anticipating, that we're not seeing, then we'd rather see that with an N of 1 as opposed to an N of 70 starting out. So we would do it with 1. Where that 1 in isn't of tremendous consequence.
Right.
It's just that we need to have the experience with it to understand for ourselves in real life implementation of this program. And then assuming that it's successful
Right.
logistically, then that's when we would look to expand it to all 7 grade levels across all 10 elementary
That makes
schools.
perfect sense. That sounds great. I think it's a reasonable tool to have. I mean, you know, we should be using every tool that's available within reason. And I'm very supportive. Thank you.
Does this include staff too?
It does not, does it?
Are we gonna offer it to staff out there?
I can ask if that's a possibility.
I mean, we've had staff members that have come up under that story.
We have, yeah. I don't know that part of the state program, if that's.
I don't know if that would be funded, in a way that our students are saying that.
I think it's an important piece here, in open cases, and how many staff members have affected again, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, with everything, you go to pro and con. Pro is exactly what you're saying, and you're spot on with it.
They're looking at count cases and.
Right. The con of it is what Dr. Thorworth spoke of earlier, which is the impact, you know, to the classroom.
I have a comment.
But we can find out that answer.
I have a comment. Just in response, I mean, nobody wants kids home for 14 days. The whole idea of a health and safety plan is to keep kids in school. What the pool testing will do for those who voluntarily choose to participate is if some student may discover that they're positive, one of 2 things is going to happen. That student will become symptomatic and would have been out of school anyway. Or, in the meantime, could have been contagious and infecting other people, or they're asymptomatic and potentially spreading it. And so, I mean, because there's a lot of talk about, you know, how many students have tested positive who wear masks, but of course it's not like they're wearing masks continually the entire day. They're taking their masks off for lunch, they're taking their masks off for snacks. There is exposure happening whether they're wearing a mask or not. So anyone who participates in the program certainly understands that if their child is positive, they're going to have to stay home. And that's part of the decision making of a parent to decide if they want to participate. That's the beauty of this, free and voluntary. And so to withhold this, which the administration is asking for, that could help break the cycle of transmission, I completely do not see the rationale behind that.
Any other questions, comments? Because somebody, sorry, yes.
Yes, our legal person review the opt-in forms.
No.
Have we figured out how we're gonna get clearances for these nurses, because they must have clearances to come to our school? The fact that their nurse doesn't include all the paperwork for that.
Again, because they're working with 160 other districts in the state, I would guess that that is something that's already been ironed out, that I will absolutely ensure.
Is this something that needs pushing
No.
for the state? I mean, the state committed a great deal of money to something that frankly nobody's participated in. I'm trying to wonder why no one participated in it. And it's not rapid by any stretch. There's no reality between test 1 and test 2. So.
You could do that,
Well, but 48 hours still. You're taking the test and you're not going to get it back unless you go.
If you do a rapid test, you would have the result in 15 minutes.
Right.
So that is an option, to do the rapid test. The testing that the county health department is doing up at the IU for educators and for school children, that's all rapid testing.
And that's all free too, right?
That is all free.
That's all free too.
Right, but you need to drive to Doylestown to do it.
So do I understand you're looking for some direction from the board?
We are, yes.
Okay. Would anyone please do statement? Their support or lack of? Supportive? Yes. I agree, I'm in support of this. Dr. Fuller?
No.
And Mr. Solomon, no. And of course, we are absent 2 members too. Mrs. Marcel? And then I tried to check and I think she dropped off. So, thank you, Ms. Marcel, please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Stevens. I was just getting off of mute, thank you. I think that for me, I would like more feedback from the community, because I think that there could be some people interested, but I also think that there is a lot of testing that is available, including home tests and other things like that. So I just would like to hear from the community before moving forward.
Okay, then we will not put it on the November meeting agenda.
I'd be happy to reach out to 2 other board members and get back to you if that would be helpful.
Sure. Thank
Will
you.
do. Good. So, Dr. Elliott?
That was our last agenda item for the evening was complete.
Okay, so that concludes our agenda items. Are there any concluding remarks from the board before we open it up for public comment? And just a reminder, our next committee meeting is not until January. Wait, all right, let's see. Any other public comment? And I would just ask you to please be mindful of the hour. I don't wish to limit anyone's comment, but as board members and administration, we began with the 6 o'clock meeting tonight, so I would just ask that we keep our comments concise. And if you could please just give your name and where you're from.
And it's comments, not dialogue, right?
Correct. Thank you. Anyone? Yes, sir.
Stand up.
Whatever you're comfortable with, sir.
My name's Jonathan Stevens. I live in Newtown. I want to talk about this last item tonight. And just for the record, just because it's free that's not a good enough reason to do something. And this is actually free. They took all that money from us. The federal government doesn't sell products to raise money. They took our money and now they're giving it out for this program and a lot of other things. I wondered why this item would be before the Education Committee. I checked the board's policies and could not find a definition or explanation of what matters would come before each of the several committees. I'd suggest that maybe going forward, it might be helpful to have on the website what types of items would go before each committee. Why are we even talking about this? Why is the board wasting valuable committee time with this topic? 24, 28, 11, 15, 19, 35, 44, 26, and 18. Those are the cases of COVID-19 in the Council Rock School District by week so far this year. I sat in that room across the hall in July and August and listened to all the people arguing and urging this board to mandate masks for the school year, or just for the beginning to see how things go. There have been no super spreader events, no wild outbreaks, and no mass shutdowns of schools. According to the October enrollment numbers, we had 10,463 students in the district. So that means that this past week, our positivity rate was 0.0017%. If you add up all the cases for the district so far this year, that totals 220, which is a positivity rate of 0.02%. What is the goal here? Are we trying to get to zero? We need to do much less testing of asymptomatic people and start taking real concrete steps to return this community to normalcy, not thinking about signing up for a statewide testing program. Why would we want to be a part of this testing program? What does a positive COVID-19 test even tell us? We know the definition of a case for this disease is different than any other disease in the history of medicine. In the United States, all it takes is 2 of the following: chills, rigors, myalgia, headache, sore throat, or new olfactory or taste disorder, or one of the following: cough, shortness of breath, or difficulty breathing. Those symptoms describe many different diseases and maladies, and most of them are not COVID-19. Cases are also determined by a clinical test, which in the US is most often a PCR test. These tests are remarkably unreliable, and if the test comes back positive, even if the person has no symptoms, they are told to isolate, quarantine, or generally stay away from the rest of society for 10 days to 2 weeks. And for kids, that generally means no school, even if they feel fine. So this move would result in more kids, and most likely healthy kids missing school, not less kids. So I ask again, why is this on the agenda? Let's say the board were to vote unanimously to opt into the Pennsylvania program. What comes next? One thing I know for sure, because I read it in the Pennsylvania Department of Health press release from August, is that it will be free and fun. The exact quote is, this end-to-end testing program was designed to be easy for schools and fun for students. The kit includes educational content for students, including comics and stickers. As long as the schools are passing out stickers, nothing says fun like a Q-tip right up your nose every week. How can any reasonable adult want to make this a part of our kids' everyday life? Most parents want a return to normalcy, not normalizing the scare tactics and lunacy of team apocalypse, best characterized by the doom and gloom and hair on fire mentality of people like Tony Fauci and Denise Brooks. Why is this an
Mr.
agenda?
Stevens, I'm not using a timer here, but I am going to ask you to wrap up your comments, please.
Okay. So I wondered again, why is this an agenda item? Then it hit me. The election is Tuesday, just 5 days away. And what would be better than trying to get some of the rational people on this board to speak out against testing is a way to gin up base supporters. It sure would be interesting to find out which board member asked to have this on the agenda. I would bet a lot of money that it wasn't Ed Solomon, Kristen, Mark, Mike, or Joe. If that is in fact the reason this is an agenda item tonight at the Education Committee meeting, 5 days before the election, the person responsible should be ashamed, and so should this committee chairman.
Any other public comment? Seeing none on the side of the room. I do have a comment, please. Yes, please, and if you would please give your name and where you're from.
Should I stand up there?
Or where you're comfortable.
Get close to the mic so people can hear you.
I'm pretty loud. Misty Loeffler, Newtown Township. I have more so a few questions that I just kind of want to be put out here. I know we have no feedback tonight, but I just have a few questions just from some research I've done. My understanding is that with the pool testing, if the pool tests positive, like, this is Dr. Black, I'm sorry. If one person in the class tests positive and they come back, the whole class then comes back to get tested. So one thing that I didn't understand, and maybe could elaborate on in the future, is what happens to the kids in that class who are brought back for testing 2 days later? What happens to the kids who opted out of the testing? How would that be handled? Because then are we going to potentially be sending kids home, quarantining kids, not having them in school that are not sick? So quarantine sick kids. I'm just asking that could come up with a record. How would be handled if the class is considered positive and there's only one case even considered? So will parents be forced to quarantine if someone tests positive in their class if they are not opting into the testing program?
Ms. McKee, I would suggest that we, because it's an easy and quick answer,
Okay, great.
I would suggest that Dr. Black be able to.
We're not quarantining students, so,
Okay.
so no, there will be no impact on students not participating.
And Dr. Black, in 2 days later, so someone on Monday, going back to the earlier timeline, Monday, we know that someone tested positive, 2 days later, they're coming back with a rapid antigen. Would every student in the class be tested, or only the students who opted in?
Only those in the pool, okay. Right. And then, in an article, for the PA Department of Health, for schools to perform these tests, they would have to be operating as a lab. And I know you talked about they would be offering in person. This requires a clinical laboratory improvement amendment, CLIA. Whose CLA license will the district be operating under? I don't know if you know the answer to that question, or if that's something that would be.
Yes, and everything with CLIA has already been vetted. They've already kind of worked through all of that.
Can you tell me what license that would be under?
I can get you that.
That'd be good. I'll follow up with you then. Also, in an article, this is the last, I'm sorry. In an article by Spotlight PA on October 7th, the data shows that only 396 schools across Pennsylvania, out of 5,000 charter, private, and public schools, only 396 schools signed up to participate in pool testing that's the total that were participating between mid-August and September 30th. Understandably, we're a month later, but that was the latest data I can find. So it's clear that Council Rock wouldn't be alone choosing to not participate in this pool testing, and I would like you to consider this low participation rate in your discussions and decisions as you go forward on this topic. Thank you.
Other public comment? Public comment on the other side? No? Well, seeing none, then I'd like to adjourn our meeting. We'd like to thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks, Ms. McKee.
Yeah.